Okay, everybody, let's get started. So I know most of y'all know me. My name is Tricia Thomas. I'm a partner here. We also have joining us today another partner. Her name is Jenna. She's a partner here and she's also our technical manager. So I'm excited for the things that she's going to share with you guys and basically just kind of talk through different ways that some technical file services that we support our clients with their QuickBooks Enterprise file. And today's topic, as I've told you guys, Jenna's going to take over from here. She's going to talk to you about some different technical services that we offer to support your QuickBooks Enterprise file. So she's going to talk to you guys about file repairs and what those are, when we might need one. She's going to talk about a file condense and what that consists of. And then last, she's going to talk about file merge. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen so Jenna can take over from here.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, Tricia. I'm super excited to be talking to you guys today about these different technical file services that we offer to our clients. It really just helps to enable us to utilize the most that we can with our QuickBooks software and make sure that we are keeping it running and functioning properly so that we are able to get what we need from a financial standpoint. The first one that I want to talk to you guys about is the file repair. Now, I know a lot of us go through and have issues with that verify utility in QuickBooks, seeing those errors and understanding what exactly those mean or how to resolve those. So I want to talk through some of the common areas we see that tend to be problematic and where that file repair can come in to help resolve those issues. Some of the common problems we see with the QuickBooks software are in-product errors. Sometimes that can be running your balance sheet and getting that out of balance error message. It can also be if we're running that verify and we see errors that the rebuild will not resolve, like target chaining issues, or sometimes we can also have network problems like those H4, O4 codes. I know sometimes those can look a little bit like gibberish, but ultimately what that's telling us is we have issues that are going on with our QuickBooks file that we need to respond to. Some additional things that can also be happening with the QuickBooks file that might prompt you to look at needing a repair are things like if you're trying to upgrade to the latest version of QuickBooks and that file will not move into the next version. We certainly see that often when our clients are wanting to make sure they're getting into the newest version of the software to take advantage of those features. But sometimes if there are issues with the file, unfortunately, we're not able to move into that new version. And again, that's where a repair could come into play and help resolve those problems so that we get to function in the newest version of QuickBooks. Other times we see things like missing data. It's very common with files that become corrupt to have data go missing. For example, sometimes we see customers or vendors that are no longer in our customer or vendor center. Those are two very likely areas that we see impacted whenever a file becomes damaged. Last, one of the other culprits that we tend to see contribute to issues with the QuickBooks file is negative inventory. I'm sure even without talking about a repair, negative inventory is a term we all hear a lot about, when we're talking through management of our workflow processes inside of QuickBooks. But negative inventory is a big contributor to corruption in QuickBooks files, and going through that repair process can help make sure that our inventory module is safe and accurate and giving us the reporting that we want. So as far as the actual repair service is concerned, what does it look like when we go through and do a repair? Some of the things that we tend to see are fixes to any kind of internal damage to the software. So one of the things that we like to do on the front end for a repair that you guys can do with your QuickBooks file is run that verify regularly to make sure that it's staying clean. And if not, we can do secondary steps to try to resolve those errors before we ultimately have to look at going and doing a repair. So if I come in here to my File tab under my Utilities, I've got these options down here that can help me keep track of what is happening with my QuickBooks file. So this verify data is something that does a review of the QuickBooks file and will tell you if there are any errors that it's seeing. If we do get any kind of errors, our next step is typically to run that rebuild to try and resolve them. But sometimes, depending on the type of errors that we have, the rebuild unfortunately can't fix everything. And if that's the case, that's okay, because that's where this repair will come into play. So these are some things that you guys can be doing on your end just to try and keep track of the health of your file. And again, we know that there is this second option to go through and do a file repair if needed. I have an example of a client actually that we worked with this week. They were having issues with their file not being able to get into single user mode. And so we were able to scope their file immediately because this was preventing them from being able to have their other team members work in the file. And so we scoped the file, were able to identify the issue that was causing it. It ended up being an issue with the admin user actually being corrupt, that admin login user in QuickBooks. And so we were able to help them get the file repaired immediately and turned around to them so that their entire team was able to function in the QuickBooks file. So certainly something where we do see more emergency cases, like in that instance where we can work through and troubleshoot immediately. But oftentimes, if it's just kind of some general performance issues that we're having with the QuickBooks file, we try to prevent that downtime for you guys if we do go the repair route. And we like to do that work for you over the weekend so that we can get the file issues resolved, get the file stable, and get it back to you guys in a timely manner where you can be operating again. So those are, again, some of the common things that we see that lead us to the file repair service. And then that's kind of what you can expect when we go through and do the repair itself. So like I said, making sure that we don't forget those in-product tools that we can use, like the verify and rebuild, to help maintain that stability. The next one that we want to talk about is the file condense. So what we are looking at when talking about a file condense is reducing your overall file size so that you have room to grow while staying in that same QuickBooks file. Some of the things that we tend to see that would prompt us to look at doing a condense are if we have a file size that is over the recommended file limit. So that is going to be between 1 to 1.5 gigabytes. And again, if we come here to our QuickBooks file, I can hit the F2 screen on my keyboard, and that will work to bring up this product information window. You'll notice here to the left, it says file size. So right now, this file that I'm showing here is quite small. It's only 42,000 kilobytes. The way I like to look at this, which makes it easier between, trying to designate kilobytes, megabytes, gigabytes, etc. When this file size reaches 7 numbers, that lets us know we are in the gigabyte space. So that is when we want to ultimately look at doing something with the file size to make sure that we can still function in the file and stay in it in the long run. So again, this F2 screen is a great way to track where that file size currently is and what our growth looks like going forward. Some other reasons why we would possibly want to look at doing a condense are if we have any unused list data that we want to get rid of. Sometimes we have, clients that we worked with historically that we don't do anything with now, or maybe a certain list has grown larger than expected. We see that oftentimes with our clients who have any kind of e-commerce connection to QuickBooks, and we're pushing in a lot of customers at a time. So that can help to clean up those lists to make sure that we have a concise list that we're using on the regular. In addition to, making sure that we can reduce the file size as well as get rid of that unused list data we don't need anymore, it will also help to improve our overall file and network performance. The less data that our QuickBooks file is having to manage, the faster it is going to be. So that condense will help to make sure that it is functioning at its peak because we've gotten rid of old data that we're no longer using. Now, one thing to note that's great with the condense is if we opt to do this, we still always have access to that historical data. So the file that we were functioning in prior to the condense gets to act now as that archive copy. So if we have to reference something from 2017, that's not a problem. We still have that old original file that we can refer back to if need be. So what does the condense ultimately look like? What we do with this process is we select a cutoff date. Typically, we recommend year end just to make that rollover for reporting easier. So most often, that's going to be a 12/31 cutoff date. Now, the year can vary. Our recommendation is typically to use the current year plus 1 to 2 years prior, so that you still have a few years of data that would be maintained in the file for financial reporting, but we want to make sure that we're getting maximum file size reduction so that you have the most room to grow in this newly updated file. Additionally, there are some alternatives to doing a complete condense where with that cutoff date, all transactional data prior gets removed, and then all transactional data afterwards is maintained. It's almost like slicing the software at that point in time and getting two pieces. So for example, if we were to say we're condensing a file and we are using a cutoff date of 12/31/2021, what that means is all transactions prior to that date are removed, and everything from January 1st, 2022 is maintained. Now, sometimes clients don't necessarily need a full condense, but they do have things that can contribute to their file size growing. For example, one area that we tend to see increase file size heavily are non-posting transactions. So those will be things like estimates, sales orders, and purchase orders. What we like to do in that case is what we call a modified condense, where we can choose to remove those transactions as of a specified date while maintaining all other transactional data. This is also a great option because those transactions do not have a financial impact on the company. So it can be a great way to help get rid of old historical information without it impacting our account balances. Another thing that we can also note is if there are any potential corruption issues with a QuickBooks file and we'd like to pursue doing a condense, we can go in and repair that database first. So it is not uncommon when we have large files that are overloading the QuickBooks system for there to be any kind of damage or corruption. And what we can do is we will go in and repair that file first, and then we would proceed with the condense. So again, talking earlier about how we oftentimes try to do those repairs over a weekend to help reduce downtime. What we can do in this case is perform the repair one weekend and then that condense over a separate weekend in order to help make sure we don't have this, large string of project phases that we are working through. So that is something to note, is we absolutely have that option if we want to do a condense, but we have some issues with the file. A repair with that condense will handle all of that. Okay, and the last one that we want to go through today is going to be the file merge. So that can also be called a consolidation. I like to say merge just because sometimes condense and consolidation can get confusing. So I think merge makes it easier to differentiate these services, but we can absolutely do a merge. So that's going to sound, be what it sounds like essentially, where we would be bringing together data from two different QuickBooks files. So if we have a company that needs to merge their QuickBooks files, or possibly if we are doing work in the file, in order to allow you guys to maintain being operational, you can continue to work in QuickBooks on your side while we're doing work on our side. And then at the end of that phase, we come together and do a merge to bring in that data that was entered while we were working in the file as well. So what the merge helps to do ultimately is make sure that that final file has the combined data that you guys are needing to be fully functional. We can even, I can think of an example with a client where they were actually migrating from QuickBooks Online to QuickBooks Desktop, and they wanted to merge multiple files. So what we did was we worked to move them into QuickBooks Desktop first, and then we performed a merge to bring all of the data into a single combined file, so that from a financial standpoint, they would have everything in one file for reporting. One of the things we also like to do, again, if there's any kind of data damage in any of the files that we are looking to merge, or if one of the files is large and we don't need to merge all of that data, again, we can go back to those previous services and talk about including a repair if any data needs to be corrected or fixed, or we can also look at doing a condense to make sure that we're not overloading the system when we're looking at combining this data. So that's the nice thing to also think about when we're talking through these technical file services, is that we have the ability to pair them with each other in order to get you guys that ultimate result you're looking for in that final QuickBooks file. All right, and I know that was a lot of information, so hopefully we've got some questions that have started to trickle in.
Yeah, Jenna, I've been keeping an eye on your questions. And so we do have a question from Angela. It says, we use class tracking to track our projects. Will a Condense remove classes or subclasses?
Nope. So that's the nice thing with the Condense is that you get to pick what list data you want removed. So the main categories that we look at are chart of accounts, customers, vendors, items, classes, and other names. So we get to decide in those 6 main areas of QuickBooks if we want that data removed or not.
Perfect. Okay, we have another question. Next question is file repair the same as purging to get rid of data no longer needed, say items and inventory no longer needed?
So that idea of purging is actually going to relate to the Condense. So again, if we have old items that we don't need anymore and or any old transactions that we don't look at anymore and we want to get rid of them, that's where that Condense could come into place. If we're just looking at list data removal, that would probably fall more into a modified Condense category where we can choose what specific information we want to remove. But that absolutely is something we can do with the Condense process.
Perfect, perfect. We have one more question. It says, I have several clients with 700 plus company files. Should I wait till they reach over 1 gig before doing anything, or would be a good idea to look at the Condense process now? So I'm sorry, it's 700 says MB. Is that, you know how terrible I am with that. You guys, I have to bug Jenna constantly to explain it. I need her to dumb it down for me.
Yeah, absolutely. So our recommendation is always to be proactive rather than reactive. So even if you're not necessarily at that 1 to 1.5 gigabyte mark yet, it's not necessarily a bad idea to still go through that Condense process. Sometimes we see clients who maybe don't have as much volume as other clients, but they've still been in the QuickBooks file for some time. I actually have a client, they've been in their QuickBooks file since 2010, and they are just now at 1 gigabyte. So just kind of at the tip of that threshold. But again, because they've got 10 plus years of data in the file, it's still a lot of information that QuickBooks is having to handle and work through. So certainly a good idea, you know, even if, again, it's not something that we maybe need to do immediately, just keeping track of that file size growth so that we're not in a position where we're past the recommended file size and having to scramble to make sure we can still use the file.
Perfect. Okay, we have one more question from Wendy. It says, how many file verifies or rebuilds should be done before reaching out for professional help to fix errors?
Yep, absolutely. That's a great question, just because we don't want to get stuck going through that process necessarily. So what we typically recommend is going through and doing 2 verifies and 2 rebuilds. And if on that 3rd verify, the error log is still showing issues with the file, that's where we would want to recommend looking at something like a repair, just because, again, we don't want you to waste your time if there are issues that verify in QuickBooks can't resolve. So that's what we would look at recommending. You can certainly take it through a couple times of that, but after that 3rd time, that's when we'd probably be looking at needing a repair.
Perfect, perfect. Okay. So thank you, Jenna, for answering the questions. You got thank you in the question section too. And Thomas, we look forward to hearing from you. Jenna can absolutely work with you on getting those files condensed where you need it. So as Jenna said, if anyone has any other questions or need any other help, know sometimes when you think about something wrong with my file, you've got a Fourlane team that can help you figure everything out. So please reach out, and we look forward to speaking with you. So everyone have a great day. And of course, Jenna, thank you so much for sharing that knowledge with us.